Do you have any trouble getting your Midjourney images to be laid out the way that you want them to? Sometimes getting the right composition or layout for your images can be tough because Midjourney often seems like it has a mind of its own. Today I'm going to give you some tips and some phrases that can help you take more control over the layout of your Midjourney images. And while it's never a bulletproof solution, it can definitely help you get better and closer to the images that you want to produce when using Midjourney. So let's get into it. First, some phrases that you can add into your prompts. These are borrowed heavily from photography as they have a lot of terminology to help nail down a specific type of shot. You don't need to be doing photographic images for these to work, and sometimes you won't always get the result you want, but we're going to cover some of these bits and pieces as we go. So you can see my first image here, which is a man outside in the rain. I've added no phrases to it, and Midjourney's pretty much chosen its own layout and composition. So what we're going to do is add a phrase. The first one we're going to add is portrait. So when we say a portrait, a man outside in the rain, it tends to frame things up almost like a professional portrait, and you can expect a kind of a similar result every time you use this keyword. You can also use close-up. Now, close-up tends to get really up close, which obviously, matches the terminology, but I have found with this particular phrase, if I choose close-up shot, it tends to be a little less tight, at least in my experience anyway. And just keep in mind that sometimes you're going to use these terms and they're not necessarily going to work. You might have to re-roll and add some phrases to it, and I'm going to cover that soon. The other one is aerial view. So if you're looking for something top down from the sky, looking down, we have an aerial view of a man in the rain. So actually taking that same subject, you can see how these different phrases have affected the image. Moving on to selfie, if I add selfie, a man outside in the rain, obviously it looks like he's taking a selfie with his phone. If I move on to top view, it's a little bit like aerial view, but a lot closer. We have a top view of a man outside in the rain. Now, sometimes if you change the topic, if Midjourney doesn't know how to draw a person or an object from that angle, such as an alien dressed in a formal suit, it tends to change things up a little bit. Now, it's still a top view photo because the alien is like laying down on a sheet. So one of the tips I do have is to reinforce that word. So we have here top view of an alien dressed in a formal suit, but if I add top view again, it kind of forces a little bit more of that angle. So sometimes using similar terms, repeating them, or trying to have a higher density of terms that sort of say the same thing can help reinforce what it is you're trying to do. I've started with top view to make sure it really nails that down, and then I've put the subject, but top view again has helped. And I'm sure if I added a few more things like overhead or aerial, I might actually even get a better shot again. So reinforcing some of these phrases can also help you move ahead and get sort of better and tighter results in regard to what phrase you're using. But moving on, we have epic wide shot. So this is kind of like pan back wide shot where the subject is kind of like centered, more sort of far away, but we're getting a lot of the environment around him. A full shot where we're getting the full shot of the subject, the man in the rain, we can see him head to toe. This works most of the time, although sometimes you will get some results in there that are a little bit funny where it's not actually the full shot, but like I said, keep re-rolling, and again, you can repeat it at the end like we did with the top view. A medium shot tends to be closer. Head, shoulders, kind of like elbows upwards is what I've been getting with this particular prompt. But again, it all takes that adjustment. And extreme close-up, getting right up and close. It's almost the same as close-up, but there's something about extreme close-up. It just offers a slightly different result. And one thing I will say too is if you start to add in other elements, so if I were to add in here extreme close-up of a man outside in the rain with wet fingers, it'll probably find some way to not only introduce fingers, but it might actually change that perspective in order to fit the fingers in naturally. So you got to think about these things a little bit as you're framing them up and going from there. The low angle shot is a pretty cool shot. This one's pretty reliable, I think, most of the time, and it's kind of like the camera has been taken down and is pointing up at the subject. So a low angle shot can help, and of course you could probably try and mix these up like a low angle full body shot or something if you want to try that, but that's a good way of getting a low angle shot of the subject depending on what it is you're after, and a high angle shot similar to top view, taking a photo from a high angle. And again, you can try and apply these to things that aren't photography. These are just the best ways I can sort of convey what it is working on. And a landscape shot is actually really good for scenery, but you can see how it's affected the man here. It's put him there and it's created a lot of scenery around him and focused on that. So with landscape shots, you tend to get more of a scenery-based look where you're getting more of the surrounding environment of the subject. Now, rule of thirds, composition, shot of. I tried a few different phrases to get the rule of thirds to work well. This one can be a little bit difficult. But the rule of thirds is essentially a sort of photography type where it'll try and put the subject down on 1/3, like centered onto 1/3 of the image, as you can see by these grid lines. And using rule of thirds composition shot of at the start is a great way to prioritize the rule of thirds composition. Adding it to the end seems to be a little less effective. But the other thing too is it's kind of hard to see with a square image. So I also created this 3:2 image where you can see he's off to one side and centered on that sort of like 66% mark. If I add the lines in again, you can see how he is basically sitting on that line, and it's kind of followed the rule of thirds for that layout. So if you're looking for something that's not quite symmetrical, you can get a good result that way. You can also use depth of field if you want to frame things with a background shot and kind of like blur things out. Not really a composition technique as much in regards to layout, but still worth knowing. Now, an asymmetrical balance. Similar to rule of thirds, it doesn't always do the same thing though, because what we're trying to do is create an image that isn't symmetrical, and that's what asymmetrical means. So we get something that is actually nice and original. We've got stuff on one side that looks different to the other, and you get a pretty neat effect. But the opposite to that, we have symmetrical balance. So a man outside in the rain, comma, symmetrical balance. See how it's symmetrical from left to right. The trees look the same, the bench looks the same, left to right, but also the way it's added the reflection. It's symmetrical vertically as well. So you can get some really interesting and really neat images using these phrases. And one thing I will just quickly want to state is some of this stuff has been added to the end because it makes more sense. Anything that mentions a shot, I've generally tried to say, you know, like a shot of blah, 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 blah. But you can put symmetrical balance, shot of a man outside in the rain. So play around with the order, before or after. I've done that, and these are the results I've gotten. So figure to ground, the idea is obviously to have sort of the figure in relationship to the background on the ground or in the foreground. So that way, like you can see the figure within the environment. So figure to ground is another really useful one if you're trying to combine a subject with a very particular sort of background. But beyond just the phrases, I do have a few more tips for you that'll help you sort of take a little bit more control if you're not quite getting the result you want. So I have here an image, top view of an alien holding a camera. It's not really that much of a top view, but I do have a tip I can give you. First thing is, when you're going to do any of this stuff, go to /settings and make sure you have remix mode turned on. That button should be green. So now if I go here to re-roll, I get to remix a little bit. And what I'm going to do is actually introduce something into the background that would be seen if it was actually on the correct angle. So I can just say something like, standing on rocky ground. Submit. So by mentioning the ground that would actually be mentioned in the shot, it has actually increased the angle as well. So actually describing the image a little bit more precisely like that can help you sort of reinforce the angle that you're trying to work with. So let's backtrack. This time I'm going to go again to re-roll, and I'm going to just get rid of holding a camera and just have a top view of an alien and hit submit. Notice how we're not getting a top view at all. Again, I don't think Midjourney understands how to draw an alien from the top quite as well, so it tends to try and focus on the features it knows best. So instead, what we can do is if we say we want alien with gray skin, I click on reroll, and this time a view of a man with gray skin. I can go and start adding phrases to try and push Midjourney in the right direction. So I'm not sure if this will work, but I go submit, and I've sort of got a better result a little bit. It's a man and not an alien. However, that angle is more the angle I'm looking for. Even though I couldn't get it with an alien, I got it with a man. So what I'm actually going to do now is I'm going to upscale this one because I think this one's closest to, and I'm going to go upscale 3. Now, one tip is to just zoom out by 1.5 or 2 if things are a little too tight. It's a standard feature and you can use it quite easily. So now I can choose which image I think is going to suit best to then start to turn this guy into an alien. I'm going to take this image again, number 3, upscale it, and then use vary region. And again, because I have remix mode turned on, I can change what this says here. I'm essentially going to grab my lasso tool and I'm going to draw around his face. I'm going to say a top view of an alien with grey skin. Now, I live in Australia, so sometimes I spell using the Australian spelling, but I then hit go, and now I have these images. So what I essentially did is take something that looks similar and use Vary Region to fix it up. Now the hands still look like a man's hands, and we don't have our camera, but that's okay. Again, I find the one I like, which is this top one, upscale it, click Vary Region, use my lasso tool to select the hands. Top view of an alien holding a camera. And I hit go. And now we've ended up with these images of him holding a camera. So it's not perfect, but of course, with a bit more time and a bit more sort of playing around, you could probably get it to the point where you're happy and got exactly what you want. It's not always about getting the image perfect on the first try. Sometimes you've just got to build it from various bits and pieces. And this is where a little bit more of the skill comes in when it comes to AI art. Understanding the tools and what you can do with them in order to have a bit more control over what it is you're doing. But that is not the end of it. So back to another alien in a suit. In this one, the head is cropped and we don't see much of the suit. And once again, I can zoom out by 1.5, and now the cropping is a little bit better. I upscale the one I want. Now, depending on what you're after, if I wanted to see more of the suit, I can simply pan down and submit. Or if I wanted to get him more off center, I could pan to the left, submit. And now we have this sort of taller frame, which could be great if you were getting something framed, very long and tall, if you wanted to have a picture of a framed alien in a suit hanging up in your house. Or you got more of a rule of thirds type sort of image, where he's inside the house that way as well. So you can actually frame an image up and by simply extending around a more tightly generated image. Keep in mind, if the perspective of that close image has the objects quite large and there's a lot of sort of like depth to it, it can look a bit funny if you continue to sort of zoom out. But otherwise, that's another way to take control of it. But you might not necessarily be happy with the exact framing. But what I recommend now is actually going a little bit beyond Midjourney. I've got two tools. One is free, the other is Photoshop, and I'm going to upscale the one I think looks the best. This one next to the frame, for some reason, looks just really kind of dull in a funny kind of way, so I'm going to upscale that one. And of course, because I want it to look good, I'm going to go upscale, subtle, and creative to see which one looks best. So now I have my subtle upscale, my creative upscale, but let's just put the brakes on that for a second, because there is actually one more thing I would like to show you. You don't have a ton of control, but it can be useful. Is this image here, you can see, since we've panned, it's now become an aspect ratio of 3:2. So if we were looking to get something wider, what we can do is come down to custom zoom. And where it says zoom to, I'm going to change that to zoom 1. And I'm going to make the aspect ratio 2:1 to make it wider. This is a little bit extreme, so it will be a big difference, but it will help illustrate the point. By adding zoom 1, I'm not zooming out from the image at all. I'm keeping it at the same zoom. But by adding an aspect ratio of 2:1, I can change the aspect ratio of the image. This is because I have remix mode turned on. So when I hit submit, now we've been able to get the exact aspect ratio that we wanted. We've taken control of that and still have our alien framed in there. And it's just another way to take an image that you've made and go, well, this is looking good, but I would like it wider or taller. You can use custom zoom to change that aspect ratio. But what happens if you were looking to crop in a little bit? It's only a basic skill, but it's one I recommend using. So if I take one of these images, I think the subtle turned out best. So I'm going to save this image. One note, do not save this image. Click on open in browser, right click and save link as to get the full resolution image. So the first thing to do is to simply crop the image. Now this is Adobe Photoshop. I will share a free method for you in a minute if you don't have Photoshop, but simply grabbing your crop tool and framing things up the way you want. So you get a nice, you can basically grab these handles, move it to where you want, click on the image and move the image around. When you're done, you can hit tick. If you also have Photoshop, you can actually go beyond the bounds a little bit if you want to. Have generative expand turned on, click tick, it will generate a background and it fills that space and crops the image. And we end up with our cropped image looking just like this. If you don't have Adobe Photoshop, Adobe actually have another free option that you can use. I'll pop a link to this in the description, but this is like an Adobe Express browser section. Use free forever. You go upload your photo. You can drag and drop your image in there, just like this. And I have my image. And I can just move these handles. So if I want to crop it to here, if I want to cut out the shoulder and get a nice tight crop that way, I can do that, hit download, and then I can save my image. And now this is my cropped image. We have the original and the cropped for free using Adobe Express. So obviously the phrases are going to be the biggest thing to get you the result you want, but you can fine tune with those functions I've just showed you. So I hope that's given you enough information to feel confident enough to get the layout and composition you want for your images. And like I said, it doesn't have to be photographic. Try it with anything. Use words to reinforce it. Try different phrases that mean similar things to really sort of get that keyword density up within your prompts to get the image you're after. So I hope you found that video useful. If you did, please consider giving it a like. And if you want more Midjourney videos, check out my channel. Otherwise, I hope to see you again soon. Have a great day.